We have two games that is happening this midweek. We have a league game, and also we have the US Open Cup final. And yes, this is the first time on my channel that I actually are doing a preview for a US Open Cup match. And that heading into next season, I'm thinking about whether or not if I should do some coverage in terms of the US Open Cup, because, the US Open Cup is a very interesting competition, and that, I love the US Open Cup, and you've seen me do like Sports Hop series in terms of the local qualifying, and you also seen kind of like some big upsets that's happening in the US Open Cup. I mean, I think maybe I might think about covering more in terms of the US Open Cup heading into next season. But as of now, I am going to be talking about the US Open Cup final, which is a matchup between two teams that came into the league back in 2017, with Atlanta United taking on Minnesota United in this final. And in terms of the road to the final for both of these teams, starting with Atlanta, they of course won 3-1 against Charleston Battery in the fourth round, and that's after extra time. And that was the game where they were supposed to be playing on the road against Charleston Battery, but apparently they had some problem. I think they had problem either with the field or the fact that the game just got rained out. So that's why this game was actually going to be playing at Atlanta and play at Kennesaw, which, Atlanta, of course, was able to beat Charleston Battery. And for a while, Charleston Battery has been really their biggest nemesis in the US Open Cup, because for whatever reason, if you can believe this, Atlanta in the previous two meeting in the US Open Cup where they faced Charleston Battery, they lost both of those meetings. Now, they of course win 3-2 against the Columbus Crew away, and that was also known as the monsoon game because, just like earlier in the season where there's a league game between Atlanta versus Columbus Crew was just an absolute monsoon, this was again the case, but it was this time Atlanta United prevailed and winning 3-2 against Columbus Crew on the road. Then, of course, they beat St. Louis FC 2-0 at home to make it to the semifinal before beating pretty much the teams that they absolutely own in the so-called one-sided derby against Orlando City away, as they win 2-0 against them. Like, even in the US Open Cup, Atlanta just cannot give Orlando City a break in terms of beating them whenever they play them on the road. Now, for Minnesota, they of course beat Sporting KC heading into the fourth round 4-1. And just like how I talked about Charleston Battery has been the biggest nemesis for Atlanta in terms of the US Open Cup, Sporting KC has been the biggest nemesis for the Loons in terms of the US Open Cup. And it's always like, for the first 2 years, they faced Sporting KC, and both times they, of course, lost to Sporting KC in the US Open Cup. Now, in the next round, they, of course, go on the road for the only time before this US Open Cup final, where they were able to beat the Dynamo 3-2, and they were actually down 2-0 into this game and came back to win 3-2 against the Dynamo. And this was also the game that Mason Toy pretty much just introduced himself as a guy that is considered one of the most talented young player in this league, and has really kind of becoming a wonder kid for Minnesota after this game. Now, in the quarterfinal, they of course smashed New Mexico United, the Cinderella team, 6-1 at home. Before, in the semifinal, they of course dispatched the Portland Timbers 2-1, and that was after they beat the Portland Timbers 1-0 just 3 days ago. So this was very impressive. The fact that Minnesota is able to beat the same team twice in a span of 3 days, because there's not many times where when you face a team twice in a span of 3 days, you can of course sweep that series during that time. But that is exactly what happened in that meeting to of course lift themselves all the way into the US Open Cup final. And obviously when you look at this US Open Cup final, Atlanta is going to be heavy favorites coming into this game. I mean, it's not just because of the fact that they're playing at home, and that they have, ever since that early season struggle, they have rarely lost at home. I mean, this season, they has just been almost untouchable at home, as it has been the case for the past couple of seasons, where it is one of the toughest places to play at when you face Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and this season they're once again proving that, and that it's not just the fact that they have a very good home record, but the talent-wise, they definitely have the advantage. I mean, they got guys like Joseph Martinez, Pity Martinez, Hector Villalba, Julian Gresso, and all these kind of talented guys compared to guys like Darwin Quintero, Ethan Finley, and Janelle Rodriguez. It's just kind of unfair in many ways. But I will say this with Minnesota, I don't want to say that they're not gonna win this one and that it's gonna be absolutely impossible for them to, of course, go to Atlanta and spoil the party in terms of them lifting another trophy. But one thing I will say to make their task easier in terms of potentially winning this game, and that this game is very important for Minnesota. I know this both of these teams want to win this trophy because this is the trophy that both of these teams have not won, and that we are once again going to be having a first-time winner in this U.S. Open Cup final. But to me, I feel like this means more to Minnesota than Atlanta does, because Atlanta has already won trophies. Like, they already won MLS Cup, they already won Campeones Cup a couple of weeks ago, and that they already have some trophy in their cabinet. For Minnesota, they haven't. And to think that Minnesota for the last 2 years being just a bottom feeder team to this season having a great season, but now reaching to the U.S. Open Cup final and actually have a legitimate shot of winning a trophy for the team for the first time in their franchise history. Yeah, you better believe this is the most important game in Minnesota United franchise history, and that I think maybe that will give them a lot of boost, and that the players will really be up for the challenge. Consider the fact that this is the biggest game in not only in their career but also in franchise history, and that I really think the way that Minnesota could potentially beat Atlanta United in this game is that they need to, one, shut down Joseph Martinez. Or actually not shut down Joseph Martinez, but at least contain him. I mean, I know shutting down Joseph Martinez is an impossible task because nobody in the league so far, at least for the past 12 games, has been able to shut down Joseph Martinez in terms of scoring a goal. But at least if you can contain him and not allow him to have a chance to put one into the back of the net, then you might have a good shot in terms of beating Atlanta United. And that you also need to make sure you stay compact in terms of your defensive shape. I have a feeling Minnesota is going to really kind of put a little bit of a low block on Atlanta in this game because, I feel like throughout this season, I've seen some games where the games that Minnesota tends to do well is that they tends to, I don't want to say that they tends to really just sit on a low block and counter, but it is the game where they are usually kind of like not the favorites, and that they are playing a team that usually are just not going to sit back, and that they of course have to break those team down, and that when they of course face a team that is gonna try to go at them, and then they of course sit back in a compact shape, those are kind of the game that kind of favorites them because they do have some pacey wingers that can of course counterattack and expose this Atlanta United defense. So that, I think, is one of the big keys of them potentially winning this game. But like I said, Atlanta is going to be heavy favorites into this game because of the fact that they're playing at home, and the talent gap is definitely in favor of Atlanta. But we shall see. It is a final. I mean, we've seen before that in finals, it doesn't matter if you have a team that is favorites coming into this game. At the end of the day, anything can happen in a final. And that we have seen underdog in a U.S. Open Cup final to be able to come out and beat the favorites. And an example of that was last year when I talk about how Philly was heavy favorites against Houston, and that Houston of course won that U.S. Open Cup. So you never know. Minnesota could definitely cause an upset against Atlanta United, and that if that is going to be the case, then this is already automatically a successful season for Minnesota. Now, talk about the other game that is happening this midweek is the league game between Montreal versus Vancouver, or the game that I'm pretty sure nobody really want to pay attention because it's between two teams that is struggling with a capital S. Now, Montreal currently coming into this game with a 10-4-14 record, while Vancouver coming into this game with a 6-9-13 record. Montreal, of course, winless in 4 games, while Vancouver lost 3-1 to 3-1, not to Vancouver. That's a misspell right there. They lost to the Quakes in that game, and I'm pretty sure Whitecaps fan does not need me to remind how they lost to the Quakes in that game, and that it was just an absolute bombardment the Quakes put on the Whitecaps in that one. In terms of the top goal scorer for both of these teams, for Montreal, Tidier still leads the list with 9 goals. Then it's followed by Okwanko with 4 goals, Lapinainen with 4 goals, Dallo and Piatti tie at 3 goals to round out that list. For Vancouver, Freddie Montero still leads that list with 6 goals. Jordy Reyna with 5 goals. Daniel Henry with 3. Lucas Minotto with 3. And Imbong Kwan with 2 goals apiece. And, for Montreal, this is an absolute must-win for them. If they do not win this game against a Whitecaps team that pretty much is shell-shocked after what happened in the last game against the Quakes, and the fact that they have to play on a short rest and have to fly all the way across the other side of the country to play Montreal on a short rest, there's no excuse for the Impact to lose this game. Like, if they lose this game or even draw this game against Montreal, their playoff chances might as well just go up in flames. I mean, I know Montreal is struggling right now, but like I said, when you play against a Whitecaps team that is pretty much on vacation right now and want this season to end after how miserable it has been, there's no way in the world Montreal should be dropping points in this game. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for my prediction, or not my prediction, but for my preview of the midweek games. For the prediction of this game, let me know in the comments below. And if you actually want to hear my prediction in this game, I predict that Atlanta will win this one, and that probably Montreal, of course, would win against the Whitecaps. But let me know in the prediction below, what do you think is going to be happening in these 2 games. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.